Welcome to the Dr. Stacy Show, where we are talking about all things faith, love, and wellness as it relates to raising our kids. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy, therapist, author, speaker, but most importantly, a mom of two amazing kiddos. Today's episode, we will be discussing autism, and I'm super excited about our guest today. Dana Garrett is a passionate author, digital creator. She lives in South Louisiana with her Eagle Scout husband and two joyfully energetic kids who inspire her every day. After her daughter's diagnosis of CSS and autism, Dana felt led to advocate for kids with disabilities and their families through her gift of writing. She's developed a wonderful children's book series highlighting, nonverbal kids and their siblings titled Alana and Wyatt's Adventures. Dana spends her fleeting free time enjoying the great outdoors and leading to impromptu, and I love this, dance parties wherever music is playing. Her work is rooted in a desire to encourage others to embrace the joy of everyday moments. Dana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm excited to share our story.
Absolutely. And speaking of sharing your story, I know in our pre-session we were just doing some great dialogue. And so I am super excited for our audience. Tell us a little bit about your journey, where it all started. Where did you get your inspiration for all that you're doing?
So, the inspiration for the books and what I'm doing in our community actually happened while I was really sick with bacterial pneumonia. Elena was 5 at the time, and we had just received her autism diagnosis finally. And I was to the point where I was too weak to talk, I was too weak to
Mhm.
walk, I was too weak to read. And basically, the only thing that I could do was pray and
Mhm.
meditate
Yeah.
and focus on what I was going to do when my body healed. And it was about 12 weeks that I really felt what these kids with disabilities live
Mhm.
with every day. And I knew that I needed to turn that into my purpose. And I felt led by God in those 12 weeks. And I, everything was pretty much spelled out for me. There was a clear path that I could
Mhm.
see. And I think I really just needed that stillness and that quiet to develop all of these things, because otherwise I was rushing to therapy appointments. I was, working, I was doing all these things. And if I didn't have this quiet stillness, I would not be doing what I'm doing today with advocacy and educating parents, not just with disabilities, but educating families that have never heard of nonverbal
Mhm.
autism. So,
And that is such an amazing, like, because most parents would say, right, I don't know what that's like. But even for you to say there was a season where you experienced the inability to communicate, the inability to even advocate for your needs in a verbal way. But you also said something that's really interesting that finally you got this diagnosis. Talk to us about that journey. What did it kind of look like from 0 to 5?
around 9 months, a doctor handed us a pamphlet, and it was to sign up for early steps. And I had never heard of early steps. I just knew that she was behind. We were in little gym class, and she was 12 months old and still not sitting up. So I knew there was something going on. We went to a developmental pediatrician, and she said she's just a late bloomer, that she did not have autism.
Wow.
So I ended up signing her up anyway for physical therapy and occupational therapy, because there were things she wasn't, up to developmentally. She wasn't at that level. So we went through and did PT, OT, and speech therapy from 12 months old, and she's still in speech today at 12 years old. Um, but yeah, actually, we did not even get a direction on
Mhm.
what type of disability she had or anything like that until my husband's cousin's child has a disability.
Yeah.
And we had tried the chromosomal blood test, and it came back
Mhm.
normal. So we thought we were in the clear. And she said, "Well, have you done the whole exome sequencing blood test?" And I said, "No." And so we went and got that done. and it came up that she has a mutation
Mm-hmm.
on one of her, um, what do you call it? She has a mutation on one of her genes.
Genes. Yeah.
Yeah. So once we received that diagnosis, Coffin-Cyrus syndrome, she was still able to get some support with
Mhm.
school. And then we also had a principal that told us she did not have autism. And finally, at five, 5 years old, one of her teachers, who we love, she said she's responding well to ABA techniques in the classroom. I think you need to go and get another opinion from this
Mhm.
neurologist that I know. So we went to that neurologist and she said, yes, absolutely, it's autism. And that you need to um, have her reevaluated for school so she can get
Mhm.
all the supports that she needs. And then continue with the type of therapies that we were doing. But then we also had a clear path. Once you get that diagnosis, you can
Yeah.
apply for Medicaid, you can apply
Mhm.
for waivers, you can apply for free pull-ups because that potty training is going to take years. And that's expensive for families. So once we got that diagnosis, again, that was in within the same month that I came down with pneumonia, and all of that just transformed me into what I needed to do moving forward, not just for my child, but for other kids like Elena.
And I'm so glad, Dana, that you said with Elena, you had to keep going to different people, right? Like I'm hearing the journey, and many, especially for girls. So we know that girls historically have late diagnoses, right? And like you heard people say, oh, they're just late bloomers, or it's kind of parents. I hear the frustration as a
Mhm.
therapist, and they'll say, well, we've gone to our doctors, and they told us just to come back, or they'll be fine. And I love that you said no. We still want to. There's something here, right? Like to
Right,
say and no parent, the hard part is to say we know there's something different, but we want to know what that is. And
right,
like you said, having the diagnosis and having the name for it gives you so many other resources and so many opportunities to even connect with other parents that are kind of going through. And I know we were talking even about her school journey, and you've had some educators that were great, but then you guys kind of had some experience that were not so great. Tell us a little bit about education
mhm.
and where you had to advocate for her.
And yeah, really, in 4th grade, she started refusing to want to go in the classroom. She would have a meltdown outside of school. We had to carry her in, both of us crying because, it's hard for me to leave my baby somewhere where she doesn't want to be. But really, you have to you have to have your child enrolled in school.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what the other options were. So I kept bringing her, and the teacher was very inexperienced and would call me to come pick her up often. So eventually, I found an ABA that was also a hybrid homeschool. So that's what she does now. She uses the Reading Eggs app, and she's doing great. Her behaviors are down. We've looked at the charts. And the ABA is what she needed for her
Mhm.
behavior. And then just like a sprinkle of education that they reintroduced to her. And that's really working out well.
And I love that because that's that holistic approach, right? To say that, listen, we have to look at the individual needs of our child. And to say for some of our students, absolutely, they can be mainstreamed in general education classrooms with educational support. The school refusal piece is huge. And a lot of parents, they're right. I know parents that are listening to this are saying, we are there right now. We are experiencing that moment of crying and dropping off. And I've worked with students with the school refusal, even up to high school, right?
Yeah.
Students who are still struggling with that, not wanting to get up, not wanting to get out of the bed,
Mhm.
the latenesses, the absences, the difficulty at drop off, even from a physical perspective. Nobody wants to feel like they're physically putting their kid into a space, right? So I love that you shared that transparency because that's going to be huge for parents, because that is part of our challenge. And I know you're saying that Elena is nonverbal. And I work with a lot of verbal autistic students, and they will tell me that school is boring, school doesn't feel
Mhm.
safe, the sensory overload, like some of those things that make them not want to go. I would imagine she was experiencing and feeling. Talk to me a little bit about and I love that you're doing a hybrid program, but you also then kind of created your own children's series out of the experiences. Talk to us a little bit about that and how you've used those books to help educators.
Yes. So the Elena and Wyatt's Adventure series has Elena with her device. And in the books, it talks about how she's nonverbal and she needs a device to communicate and uses sign language. And Wyatt, her sidekick brother, also kind of advocates for her when they meet new characters. And so when I read this to a gen ed class, they have an amazing amount of questions after. Inclusive classrooms have kids that are verbal and nonverbal, and they see the devices, but they're not told what it's for, or, the teacher may not know how to explain it. So these books are a way to educate the kids, especially that are in inclusive classrooms. Even kids that have siblings that are on the spectrum, they've never seen themselves in a book with their sibling that has autism. So this is a way to not only educate the general education, but also to for kids like Elena to see themselves in the story.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because the idea of including the sibling, I think, is so important because even in treatment, siblings feel left out, right? All
Hmm.
the attention, all the focus is on my autistic sibling. And then again, I deal with both sides of that as the therapist, right? Working with the autistic student, but then their siblings like, hey, and so oftentimes even in family therapy, we're saying, how do we make sure that everyone is included? And so I
Yeah.
love that books include the siblings and that you're using it as an education tool because you nailed it. And I'm going to talk later in the show about that moment when people don't understand what's happening for the
Hmm.
autistic child in the moment and they're looking on. Because even things in the classroom, I've heard students say, well, that student is very disruptive, but not understanding what
Hmm.
the student is struggling and what those struggles are about.
Ele-
Excuse me.
Elena actually in the Rare Gator Rescue, Elena has a meltdown in the story. So we go through that. Her brother uses calming techniques in the story. So even if anyone sees a child having a meltdown, they're like, okay, maybe I just need to talk calmly to them. Maybe
Mhm.
I need to give them a minute. Maybe I need to explain that they're okay. And so just putting it in, I guess, words that, the younger kids can understand, but also as the adults are reading the books, they can also have some tips on what to do.
Yes. And I'm going to circle back to something you said, even with strategies here. You're using OT, you're using PT, we've got speech, we've got devices, we've got sign language. I don't know that people listening realize how many services that are in place oftentimes for autistic children and youth, even as a 12-year-old, right? Even as a young adolescent.
Mhm.
Talk to me a little bit about, and I'm just going to hit OT and PT for a moment because I want audience members to understand what were some of the things that you saw from an improvement perspective from using those types of services? Because I get that question a lot. Why do we need to use OT? Why do we need
Yeah.
to use PT? People understand speech, but they
Mhm.
don't understand OT and PT.
So, from what we were told, PT and OT, you need to get their body moving. The physical part of the brain needs to start moving first, and then it opens the doors to absorb the speech part. So that's what we did. Elena she didn't crawl, she scooted. And from scooting, we got her to stand. And then from standing, we'd put her iPad across the room to get her to walk. And so it was very much, she was driven by what if Minnie Mouse was playing on the other side of the room, she would move towards it. And so, yeah, the speech therapist definitely recommended those other therapies first. And then speech also on top of that. But for some reason in the brain, you can probably explain that better. But the getting their body moving opens the doors for them, like I said, to absorb the speech sessions.
Absolutely. And that's what it's interesting for like for most of our neurodivergent diagnosis, we say physical movement is key, right? So that daily exercise, even when we talk about health for general well-being, we say that 30 minutes of physical exercise movement.
Right.
But oftentimes people, the cost sometimes with services, looking at why do I have to go to 2 and 3 appointments a week? But this is kind of the norm when we talk
Yeah.
about especially that early intervention. And when you said early steps, it's so key for children before the age of 3. Most states have services that are free that will help to evaluate and assess. Although we oftentimes hear that they do not do such a great job as well with catching autism, even in your story. I mean, going to a developmental pediatrician that didn't even catch it is huge because that's usually where I send people.
Right.
Go to developmental peds, go to the neurologist because, and again, having 2 or 3 individuals look at your child, do an assessment, do a screening, I think is also key, especially in females, because we know the research supports that we're just seeing late diagnosis, even as late as adolescence, for a lot of our girls that we kind of say are just quirky or just, like I said, just kind of delayed, but not there yet. And then this really kind of then morphed into bigger advocacy, right? Your own journey. We've got the books, but then you said, even as a caregiver, as a parent, as someone who is living this every day, where's the support for our community? Talk a
Mhm.
little bit about the great things that you're doing with your group me, your caregivers, and just helping support parents.
Well, first, I'd like to say the blue zones of the world have
Mm,
strong communities.
yes.
And that's exactly where I started, was like, can I how can I expand? How can I help other caregivers like me? And so we developed a not only a virtual meetup where we do coffee talk and hire specialists to come on and talk about what they do, but we also do Sunday strolls where we just reconnect. The kids connect, the caregivers connect, and yeah, so we're doing. And then I'm also highlighting inclusive events locally, and just getting the word out. And yeah, it's all in the GroupMe app, and
Mhm.
we ask questions about doctors and schools and just how did you get through the day today? Did you get out of bed? Did you get dressed? Did you remember to tell your kid that you love them, even though they can't tell you back? Um, so yeah, that community is so important, and I hope that more people can develop little community, pockets of love like this wherever they live.
Mhm. And I love that you said pockets of love. One of the things in my book, Love Our Babies Well, I did a whole chapter on neurodivergent parenting and providing tips and strategies and that connection piece, because you're right, the community advocacy piece comes from support, right? Knowing, like you said, even providing resources to people saying, hey, listen, this is what's in our community, this is what helps, so that people don't feel like they're starting from scratch. Many times I look in Facebook groups for ADHD parents or parents with autistic kids, and they're like, I just got the, like you said, I was just given a pamphlet, right?
Right.
I was just
Right.
given a diagnosis, but no direction, no what's next, no, hey, this is the checklist, or these are the things that you should be involving your child in and getting them involved in, which again, I think is part of the challenge for families is that
Mhm.
even as professionals in this space, we don't say, hey, here are your next steps, or these are the
Mhm.
things that you may want to look into now that you have this diagnosis. We're doing a great job with assessing. Diagnosing and assessing is
Mhm.
definitely on the rise, and we're seeing the numbers increase. But you're right, that next piece of even providing. And then you have this really great love for writing. So even turn that into another opportunity. Tell us about New Orleans Mom and kind of what you do there in that space for families.
Sure. New Orleans Mom is a local platform where moms share their stories, and I actually share all things special needs. So, where to send them to camp, what sports to get them involved in, what therapies that are fun for them. And I've written about 22 posts so far, and they're just so supportive and they want to help families just like I do. And, Elena's 12. So, these posts are for the parents that are just getting diagnosed, and they can, like I said, see themselves, see their kids, through this information and maybe have a better direction.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love that you said from an age perspective. Now at 12, where do you see, I guess, have some of the resources and supports kind of pulled back now that Elena's 12? Do you still like feel like there's more things that we put in or different things now that she's 12? What does that look like from a resource perspective for a 12-year-old?
The ABA clinic that she's in is the only one in the North and South Shore here that takes kids over 7.
Wow.
So yeah, it definitely narrows. The private therapies take them up to all ages, but like the ABA, that would be hard to get into later.
Yeah.
And then the camps, people are starting to step up. There's foundations that are being formed just to have camps for these kids when they're out of school, when they're older.
Mhm.
So I see that developing. And I see a lot of former teachers that are coming together and putting together enrichment classes for the teens and the adult kids on the spectrum. So I feel like that is expanding. A few years ago, they didn't have things like that for the
Mhm.
older kids, but people are realizing that these kids grow up and they're,
Right.
yeah, they're
Beyond
still
7,
going to need,
right, beyond 7.
hmm
That's where I see as a therapist. It's interesting. So, my nephew is autistic. And when I first started working with children 20 years ago, I actually did not work with children who were autistic. And I had a family come in, and their student was in 8th grade. And they said, "Hey, listen, we've done all the ABA stuff, we've done all the other stuff. We want you to be a therapist for behavioral." And he was a verbal student. But it was interesting because that what sparked me. There's like, wait a minute, like you don't want me to treat autism because you feel like you've treated it, but you need me to treat the other stuff, the
right,
ADHD, the behavioral stuff, the teenage stuff that's kind of in the developmental appropriate age.
right,
But that is true. Like we look at the services, and I think you're bringing highlighting that for people, and I really love that we need to start looking at services from 12 to 26, for example.
yeah,
And really recognizing that for these teenagers, for example, I know there's foundations and groups that do like a prom and they do activities, but even to say life skills and job skills and work and college looks different. I worked on a
yes,
campus where autistic students didn't thrive when they were going away to college, but maybe the community college and programs there are helping to support. So, well, Dana, thank you. This has been so great. As we kind of wrap up, what would be maybe one thing that you'd want parents to know, whether it's about autism, about disabilities? What's one kind of like final tip that you really would love to share with our families that are listening?
I would say everyone belongs. Doesn't matter your ability. It doesn't matter your diagnosis. Don't ever feel like you don't belong. Don't ever feel like your child doesn't belong. Um, Always stand up for yourself and for them. And sometimes it does just come down to educating people and letting them know what you're going through, what your child's going through. And yeah, I think education is key to prevent bullying, to include more awareness, and actually not just awareness, but acceptance. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that acceptance piece. Whew, yeah, because we can be aware all we want, but if we
Yeah.
don't accept, that's going to be key. So, Dana, here's the part in the show where I always tell people it's our laughter moment, right? So, I believe, and again, Proverbs 17:22 tells us that a joyful heart is good medicine. And so, I have a Laffy Taffy joke for you. Okay. So here we go. What did the tree say at the end of the party?
Time to leave.
Close. I love it. I'm leafing.
Okay. I
Great.
was close.
I love it. You're so close. All right. So, how can folks get in touch with you? How can our families listening get your information, get your books, tell us all your socials, where we can find you?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Dana Garrett, and you can find my books on Amazon. It's amazon.com/author/Dana Garrett, and it lists all the books, all the activity books, all the coloring books. I have mindfulness books for adults. I have a self-love guided journal for teens and adults. So not just the children's
Mhm.
series, but I'm writing for the family as a whole, and through all their ages and stages. And thankful for the work you do too, because I think you're doing along the same lines.
Mhm. Yes, thank you. And Dana, thank you so much for being here. All right, folks, before we go, we have our Love Our Babies Well send off. And today we've really talked about understanding autism. And maybe you've been in the store and you've seen that child having that meltdown or crying over a toy. And maybe you thought, that parent's a bad parent, or maybe that child's just spoiled. But have you ever stopped for a moment to think, no, maybe that child is autistic, and maybe that parent is doing the best that they can in that moment to handle what's happening? We, the imaginary audience for other parents, we need to take a moment and pull out our compassion, stop judging, and especially things that you don't know anything about. Every day, parents with autistic children are trying to expose their children to everyday experiences and hoping deep down that this experience will go well. Raising autistic children come with a resolve and a dedication that is to be celebrated and supported. So let's be the village. Let's be in that blue zone community to help support parents with their journey. And let's take a different look, even at our own journey. And maybe the next time that we're in the store and we see that parent struggling, maybe we can smile, take a moment to look at them, encourage them, let them know that they've got this. Thanks for tuning in today to the Dr. Stacy Show. Until next time, keep the faith, love the babies, and pursue wellness.